First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Rakal Kadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth in sincerity. And a shout out to Yakim that's out there on the four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. As we are nearing the end, you can see, though, that the 10 horns shall hate the whore, which is the EU. U.S. slaps Europe, Canada, and Mexico with steel aluminum tariffs. We had warned that this one was coming, and so unable to win concessions from its trading partners ahead of the Friday deadline, the U.S. introduced tariffs on steel aluminum imports from Canada, Mexico, and the European Union, which is the 10 horns. The new 25% tariff on steel imports and 10% tariff on aluminum imports from the EU, Canada, and Mexico come into force at midnight, which is 4 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on Friday. So, technically our time, it's already happened, according to U.S. Commerce Secretary Ross. So, this is going to definitely get them to hate the whore. You start fucking with their money. As another brother had already put it in a video. So, we got that going on here. And, so, there's more. Bad day for world trade. Brussels vows to retaliate against U.S. tariffs in coming hours. So, there will be retaliation for this. The EU, which is the 10 horns, will introduce swift counterbalancing measures to steel and aluminum tariffs imposed by the United States, according to the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. This is a bad day for world trade, so we will immediately introduce a settlement dispute with the World Trade Organization and will announce counterbalancing measures in the coming hours. Juncker said in a speech in Brussels, "It is totally unacceptable that a country is opposing unilateral measures when it comes to world trade." And these are supposed to be America's allies, but the deep state Amalek is fucking off the allies, because all Donald Trump is a holding company for the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the Amalekites. The response followed Washington's decision on Thursday to impose a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on all aluminum imports from the EU, Canada, and Mexico. The countries had been granted a temporary exemption from the tariffs introduced by the Fuck House, that's what I call it. On March 1, the metal tariffs will come into force at midnight, 4 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, Friday. So, again, the U.S. is messing with the 10 horns, and isn't this a good thing? But wait, there's more. See if this motherfucker will load. Goddamn Esau. Okay, well, we know that Bashar al-Assad has been speaking, and I have some of the interview, which I'll be playing in just a short minute here. But this is coming from RT, which it was an RT interview. No answer to Animal Assad. In other words, remember when Donald Trump tweeted just right before he bombed Syria, saying that you want to, he was tweeting Trump, or tweeting Putin, he is saying that you support that gas-killing animal. No answer to Animal. Assad's Syrian leader tells RT he does not have insulting nickname for Donald Trump. Yes, because Bashar al-Assad, believe it or not, even though he's demonized in front of everybody, he's actually kind of a gentleman. He pretty much has been, been the gentleman. He just. He doesn't react. It's the same thing with Vladimir Putin. They don't react and shout out all this, vulgarity towards one another. No, they just, they've been exposing Esau, the so-called white man, for a while, even though we know Putin's a Edomite. But, either way, they've been exposing America. U.S. President Donald Trump infamously called his Syrian counterpart Animal Assad in one of his tweets when he asked whether it was a nickname for Trump. Assad told RT he does not use such language. This is not my language, so I cannot use similar language. This is his language. It represents him, Bashar al-Assad said in an interview with RT which will be shown in full on Thursday at 11:30 Greenwich Mean Time. And I do have that interview, but we're going to get to the highlights of that interview because it's like almost a half hour. Can't do that in a 15-minute thing. We were close to direct conflict between Russia and U.S. inside Syria, Bashar al-Assad also said in the interview. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says Moscow deterred the West from launching a devastating countrywide airstrike last month and believes that Damascus has nearly won the 7-year war despite the continued United States interference. With every move toward the Syrian Arab army and for the political process and for the whole situation, our enemies and our opponents, mainly the West, led by the United States and their puppets in Europe and in our region, then try to make it farther, either by supporting more terrorism, bringing in more terrorists to Syria, or by hindering the political process, Bashar al-Assad told RT correspondent Murad during a sit-down interview in Damascus, noting that without outside funding, his opponents inside the country could not be, or without funding, his opponents could be subdued within a year. So again, the United States wants to make sure that he doesn't regain power of the country. And so there's more. Okay, first and foremost, I'm going to play the video about the tariffs and then go into what Bashar al-Assad has said. And make a note that AMTV is like freaking out over what he said because, of course, they're going to really play this one out because, of course, Bashar al-Assad that says the United States must leave Syria or else they will remove by force. Shalom. So here's the part about the tariffs.
The US has announced it will slap the EU with tariffs on aluminium and steel imports, with the measures coming into effect on Friday. Canada and Mexico will also be hit. Donald Trump first announced the global tariffs back in March, but in a concession to allies, including the EU, certain exemptions were granted, although they've now been removed. So let's get the latest from Samira Khan. She joins us from Washington. Good evening, Samira. Has there been much reaction then to this decision by Donald Trump?
Well, the Secretary for Commerce announced the tariffs after meeting with the French finance minister, and the tariffs reportedly threaten billions worth of European exports to the U.S. The EU is understandably outraged, and they called it a horrible day for trade. Let's take a look.
It is a bad day for world trade. It is totally unacceptable that a country is imposing unilateral measures when it comes to world trade.
As for the measures, Brussels has previously promised to retaliate with 25% tariffs on U.S. products like motorcycles, jeans, cigarettes, cranberry juice, and peanut butter. Let's take a quick look.
So now we will also impose import tariffs. This is basically a stupid process. The fact that we have to do this. But we have to do it. We will now impose tariffs on motorcycles, Harley-Davidson, on blue jeans, Levi's, on bourbon. We can also do stupid. We also have to be this stupid.
Now, the Secretary for Commerce has downplayed the tariffs, so it seems like it won't really affect U.S.-EU relations, but we'll just have to see what happens and if the EU decides to retaliate.
Oh, you can best believe it because I already read the article. All right, let's go to Bashar al-Assad.
Now, beginning with Syria, the president of that country says that the United States must leave, as the Syrian people will no longer accept illegal foreign presence in that country. In an interview with Russia Today, Assad said that the West, led by the U.S. and its regional allies, have left no stone unturned to inflame terrorism and hinder political process. He also held Russia for restraining Washington's meddling in the region and deterring the West from launching a devastating war on Syria. Assad said the Syrian army's repeated gains show that Washington is losing its militant cards. He added that the Syrian army will liberate areas held by US-backed SDF militants if they do not opt for negotiations. Assad also called for improved air defenses to stop the repeated Israeli aggression against this country. The Syrian president also responded to a remark made by his US counterpart that referred him as, quote, Animal Assad.
This is not my language, so I cannot use similar language. This is his language. It represents him. I think there's a very known principle that what you say is what you are. So he wanted to present what he is.
Assad stressed that Trump's invention of an insulting nickname didn't really matter. He said the opinion of the people adhering to moral and ethical principles mattered to him, not the ones like Trump. He added that somebody like Trump will change nothing for him and that he would not retaliate with insults. Trump made a remark on Assad in a tweet back in April and blamed him for the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria. Damascus has strongly denied the allegations. Now from San Francisco, let's bring in Scott Bennett, who is a former U.S. Army psychological warfare officer. Good to have you with us, sir. Why does President Assad of Syria want U.S. boots out of his country, you think?
Well, because it's a war crime. It's an act of war. It's an invasion. Any U.S. troop, any military, any American military, or any foreign military that is on the land of Bashar Assad of Syria is invading the country, and it is a war crime, and it should be brought up in the International Criminal Court and the United Nations Security Council as such. Russia is there by invitation. Iran is there by invitation, and they are fighting the terrorists, which the American people thought and were deceived into believing that the Americans were fighting, where the opposite is true. I think President Bashar Assad's interview is profoundly moving and very accurate, and I support him wholeheartedly, as do many in the American military and the American political leadership, such as Senator Dick Black and Tulsi Gabbard and many others who know Syria, who know the conflict, and know Israel and the United States and the entire history of Saudi Arabia being the prime source of the mercenary terrorists. So the biggest opportunity that Bashar Assad has is when he asks the question, how do we close the gap between their plans and our plans? It's very simple. President Bashar Assad has to engage in a massive public relations campaign and information operations campaign to win the American people, to show the American people they've been lied to, they've been deceived, they've been fighting for terrorism and financing terrorism and killing their own children in uniform by arming these terrorists. The American people are very ignorant of this fact. They, in fact, have been sorely deceived by Israel, and, in fact, they need to also remind President Trump that he made promises to remove American forces from Syria. He tweeted about it. He communicated endlessly on the campaign trail. So either he's a liar and a hypocrite, or he's simply forgotten or been deceived or bullied or pushed into making...
Which we know that Donald Trump is a piece of shit. He was a part of the deep state all along.
Very diplomatic, but very forceful, and communicate to the European people and the Americans that the American leadership has launched and started this war recklessly, and now it's coming to an end. And I think Bashar Assad is very wise to the fact that he wants to bring the West to the negotiating table, but he cannot accept anything less than absolute reconquest of his own country. He has to expel every disease of terrorism that has infected his body politic, and Russia and Iran are helping him do that.
So you just call it American terrorism. I'm going to continue with the Chris Green AMTV, and it's probably Chad, but I'm going to continue the second part of this to show how they're freaking out because, of course, Bashar al-Assad is saying, hey, these terrorists, these American-supported terrorists, which is the United States occupation, must leave Syria or be removed. Shalom. Until next video. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahshai, Ba'ashem Rakal Kadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles, great millstone, who have taught me this truth. And a shout out to Yakim that's out there on the four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth, risking your lives to go out there and teach. In a world that does not accept, because once you come into this truth, you find out that the world is your enemy, as it was an enemy of Yahweh Shai, and that we are the very people that he died for. the elect, the 1/3, blacks, Latinos, Native American, and the confusion of faith that be among our nation. U.S. warns Assad that any attack against their forces in Syria will end badly for them. Could this be the Damascus prophecy? Because no matter what, if Assad ever were to win the war, he would have no choice but to get the United States and its occupation out of there. The Pentagon issued a stern warning to Bashar al-Assad on Thursday after he said that his troops will retake lands from the U.S.-backed forces if they do not leave Syria. In response to Assad, the Pentagon warned that any attack against its allies will be a bad policy. Any interested party in Syria should understand that attacking the United States or our position partners, which are the terrorists, will be a bad policy. Well, it's a bad policy that they're there because there's no way that Bashar al-Assad or the Syrian people are going to support terrorists. Because that's all that America's ever been is a terrorist. Because who runs America? Who is the holding company? What's he the holding company for? These goddamn Amalekites, these fake-ass fucking Jews, that are fucking doing this shit. Lieutenant General McKenzie response came after he was asked about Assad's comments towards the terrorist group Syrian Democratic Forces. Okay, so we're going to play Chris Green AMTV part now. Okay, so it's really Chad because, of course, Chris Green's not on this one. So here we go.
And what's going on in Syria now, we still have U.S. troops there. Okay, U.S. troops are still there. They're supposedly training rebels. This is what's occurring. But what have we seen? We have seen that Russia, Bashar al-Assad, Iran, and Israel, they're kind of all negotiating, right? They're all negotiating because of this one primary reason. You have Bashar al-Assad's government, okay, who's basically cleared out most of Syria. They have the biggest swath of territory in Syria. They're obviously finishing clearing out little territories surrounding Damascus. Now they're going to go a little bit southwest Damascus to clear that area out as well. And clear the area out of who? Right? These supposed rebels, well, most of them are radical Islamists. This is what we see. But we have Israel who negotiated with Iran to say, look, you can't allow Iranian troops to be in the south area that's near the Israeli border, especially when the fight is occurring to clear and to basically get back the territory. So these negotiations have been going on, and Israel's hand is so strong, okay, because they've been bombarding the Bashar al-Assad government, they've been attacking Iranian bases and so forth, and they've really put up an aggressive, not just negotiation, but attack on the Bashar al-Assad government, threatening not only Syria's survival, but threatening to attack Iran, and this has been going back and forth between the two countries, obviously. So this is what Bashar al-Assad just said. In an interview, he was stating that the U.S. has to leave, okay? Now, this is what's happening with President Putin, because what did he say after meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu? That all foreign forces need to leave. Who is he really talking to? Is he really talking to Iran? Is he really talking to his own country? No, he's talking to the United States. He's talking also countries like Saudi Arabia that they need to leave, because who is the victor in Syria? Bashar al-Assad. Who is the victor? Who won this war? Okay, Bashar al-Assad. So now it's time for all foreign forces to leave. And he's saying that obviously if the U.S. leaves, okay, then Iran will back off. There will be no need, and so will Russian forces. As long as the survival, as long as the Bashar al-Assad government is implemented, it's solidified, it's protected, we won the war. But do you think the United States is going to leave? Absolutely not. Their interest is to divide Syria. Honestly, this deep state policy of intervention in Syria is only causing the war to go on longer. Would you agree? But this is what Bashar al-Assad stated. This is what he stated. The government has started opening up the doors for negotiations, and that the U.S. troops have to leave. If not, we're going to resort to liberating those areas by force. He's talking about areas that are held by the rebels and where the U.S. special troops are, that we're going to liberate these areas by force. We don't have any other options with the Americans or without the Americans. The Americans should leave now. Somehow they are going to leave. Obviously, if Bashar al-Assad decides to send his military and starts fighting with U.S. troops, that is going to have a huge effect throughout the entire region. So, I lay out a question to you guys. Do you think the Americans are going to leave? Do you think we're going to leave? No, because the deep state policy is there to ensure they split up Syria, okay, for oil, territory, and power. Do you think Russia is going to leave? No, they've spent too much resources to protect the Bashar al-Assad government for oil, territory, and power. Do you think Iran is going to leave? Iran and Syria have been allies for so long. They have helped protect the Bashar al-Assad government for a very long time. They are not going to leave. So, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to update you as soon as possible.
Ezekiel prophecy happening. We may see Isaiah 17 real soon. Okay, so what's been happening is, of course, the United States and its allies have been expanding. Satellite images show U.S. expanded Tanf base as battle for Syria South looms. So, basically, United States is supporting the terrorists, as it always has, because America is the terrorist. The United States military has reportedly expanded its base in Tanf area as the Syrian government forces amass more troops for final battle in Dara province. Recently published satellite images show several buildings and barricades have been added to the base during the past 3 months, as well as heavy military equipment, including at least 30 technical vehicles. According to the latest reports, the United States shall hand over Tanf base to the Syrian forces under the Dara offensive, expected to be launched on movement. In exchange, Russian guarantees that no attacks will be waged by the Syrian Arab Army against the U.S.-backed forces in eastern Syria. Meanwhile, more reinforcements pour into the southern battleground of Dara for the upcoming major offensive. So, pretty much this thing's going to escalate. And as I said before, we may see Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49 come to pass. Of course, there's more. EU making progress on protecting Iran trade. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says the European Union, which are the Ten Horns, has made progress on measures to protect the bloc's companies from U.S. sanctions on Iran, but they are still insufficient. We have moved forward on one point, which is the implementation of a European rule that dates from 1996, which have modernized and allows us to protect our firms against the American terrorist pressure, but that's not enough, he told France's LCI television. So, anyhow, the Ten Horns are beginning to hate the whore. Isn't this wonderful? U.S. warns of ability to take down China man-made islands. So, of course, they're going to start shit here. Pentagon official has warned China that the U.S. military could take down Beijing's artificial islands. Well, don't be a chicken shit. Fucking do it. You fucking piece of shit. All you are is a bunch of fucking talking heads. Why don't you fucking do something instead of just run your mouth, you piece of shit? Fuck you, Esau. That's what I say. I want to encourage this. Esau's a fucking coward. He's a piece of shit. I would tell you that the United States military has had a lot of experience in the Western Pacific taking down small islands. Of course, you fucking bombed the shit out of goddamn places, but you're now a bully that the rest of the world is, let the weak say I'm strong. We're seeing this happening. Isn't this a great thing? So yeah, we just sit back and relax. It's like, just fucking do it. Just fucking do it. Go ahead. Attack China, you piece of shit. Which is really Moab. U.S. seeks to provoke conflict with Syrian forces, commentator. A commentator says the United States seeks to provoke a conflict with Syrian government forces in an attempt to justify a new war. So that's what this is really about. Purposely starting a new war. I'm going to see if I can get this video to play. Hold on a second.
Is Scott Bennett. He's a political commentator, and he joins us via Skype from San Francisco. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Bennett. Now, what is the real chance of there to be a confrontation, so to speak, between the Syrian armed forces and those militant groups that the U.S. supports, or even the U.S. itself?
Well, that's what they're banking on. That's what they want. They want a conflict. They want to desperately provoke and trigger some sort of an engagement where the United States forces and the Bashar Assad Syrian forces can get into a conflict, because then the United States can claim, like they did in the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, that they were invaded, they were harmed, they were killed, American soldiers killed, and therefore a new war needs to be justified. They're waiting for that. Now, Syria, and I don't think Bashar Assad will be foolish enough to fall into that. He does not need to engage in an aggressive offensive war. He simply needs to operate under a siege mentality. That means surrounding every base, every piece of land that the SDF forces and the U.S. forces are located on, and surround them completely and ensure that they do not break out. They do not have any breathing room, any inches to expand, any maneuverability.
Shalom. So, anyhow, that's what's going on there. Pretty much, they're trying to back them into a corner.
It was taken by the terrorists. So this is an opportunity for President Bashar Assad basically to take the high ground and say to the world, we're dropping flyers that say to the rest of the areas that were taken by the U.S. SDF forces, that there are rogue military elements within the United States that are disobeying President Trump. There are rogue elements that are seeking to destabilize Syria, to expand terrorists up into Turkey, up into Europe, up into Russia. And for that reason, Syria and all of the other countries that are interested, such as Iran and Russia and China and Turkey, need to be on the same sheet of music and constantly saying, the U.S. is financing terrorism, it is backing terrorism, it is providing terrorists from Saudi Arabia the opportunity to go up and to try and destabilize Syria, to steal its natural resources.
But Mr. Bennett, these countries have been doing that for a good part of this conflict now. Do you suggest then that Syria basically be okay with U.S. presence on its soil and tolerate those militant groups that it backs to operate on its soil in the eventuality that it may not get attacked by the U.S.?
No, they can't tolerate it at all, because they will be attacked. It is a matter of time. That's why they can't tolerate a single troop on their soil, because the U.S. and Israel and Saudi Arabia will use that to exploit it to achieve their end game agenda, whether it takes a year or a decade. These people are pathological. They are obsessed with this fantasy, this obsession of full spectrum dominance, and Syria has been labeled the key domino. If that falls, then Turkey would fall. Europe would be overwhelmed to the point where they would be enslaved to the United States for security, and Russia would be consumed with dealing with these terrorists on its southern flank, and Iran would be consumed with battling that. This is the battle of the bulge.
And so here we go. I'm going to read out of Isaiah chapter 17. And I think in the next part of this, I'll just re-upload the Bashar al-Assad interview since it's too long anyway. Shalom. And, as Gad was overcome by the troop, we know that the troop is Esau, the so-called white man. Behold, Damascus will cease from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. The cities of Roar are forsaken, they will be for flocks, which shall lie down, no one shall make them afraid. The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Syria. Shalom.
Mr. President, thank you very much for inviting us here, for giving this opportunity. Having spent years now traveling to and fro Syria, reporting from here, it is an honor to have finally met you. But Mr. President, since time is short. First question, your latest victories in Ghouta, in Yarmouk, they have drastically changed the situation on the ground in Syria. How much nearer the end of this war are we now, in your estimation?
First of all, you're most welcome in Syria. With every move forward in the battlefield, with every victory, with every liberated area, we are moving closer to the end of the conflict. And I always say it, without external interference, it won't take more than a year to settle the situation in Syria. But at the same time, with every move forward for the Syrian army and for the political process and for the whole situation forward in the positive meaning towards the more stability, our enemies and our opponents, mainly the West, led by the United States and their puppets in Europe and in our region, with their mercenaries in Syria, they try to make it further, either by supporting more terrorism, bringing more terrorists coming to Syria, or by hindering the political process. So our challenge is how can we make this gap, to close this gap between their plans and our plans. And I think we are succeeding in that regard. But at the same time, it's difficult for anyone to tell you when. But it is getting closer, that's self-evident.
Well, your latest military victories, they have been, objectively speaking, spectacular. The speed at which rebel defenses that have withstood for years have collapsed. Are you planning on retaking all of Syria by force? We're talking about Idlib, the border with Israel, SDF-controlled territories.
The war is the worst choice. I think every Syrian agreed upon this fact. But sometimes you only have this choice, especially when you talk about factions like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like Al-Nusra, and the like-minded factions. Actually, most of them have the same ideology, Jaish Islam, Dahra Sham, and so on. They're not ready for any dialogue. They don't have any political plan. They only have this dark ideological plan, is to be like any Al-Qaeda controlled area anywhere in this world. So the only option to deal with those factions is force. At the same time, in other areas, we succeeded by implementing reconciliations, especially when the community in those different areas made pressure on those militants to leave those areas. So I think the best choice is to make reconciliation. This is our plan. But when it doesn't work, the only method to resort to is the force.
Well, with regards to reconciliation, how wise is it to send all of these veteran jihadists with their small arms to Idlib? By now, tens of thousands have gone to Idlib. They have consolidated. They have built defenses. Eventually, as you say, you'll have to fight them. On the other hand, are you perhaps planning on building an area that is outside of government control?
Actually, we always say we're going to liberate every area. So it's impossible for us to intentionally leave any area on the Syrian soil outside our control as government. This is natural. And as you know, Idlib was captured by the terrorists in 2015 with this Turkish support. It was mainly captured by Al-Nusra and some other supportive factions. We started the reconciliations before that time, but every reconciliation happened after that time, after 2015. It was, I think, May 2015. Every faction wanted to leave the city or the village. They choose to go to Idlib. This is a very good indication that they have the same ideology, because they choose to go to Al-Nusra area. They didn't choose to go to any other area. So we didn't send people to Idlib. They wanted to go to Idlib because they have the same incubator, They have the same atmosphere, way of thinking, and so on. This one part, the other part, which is military aspect of your question, the plan of the terrorists and their masters was to distract the Syrian army by scattering the different units all over the Syrian soil, which is not good for any army. Our plan was to put them in one area, 2 areas, 3 areas. Let's say if you have 2 or 3 or 4 frontiers, better than having tens and maybe more than 100 frontiers at the same time. So militarily, it is better. They chose it, but it's better for us from the military point of view.
On the other hand, talking about similar mindsets, Idlib is predominantly, the rebels there overwhelmingly are Sunni. You know, as a Sunni myself, I have a long distant relative who came to Syria to fight against you, to resist you, because he was told that you were targeting, you were killing Sunnis, and that is what many people in Idlib believe. Why is it that so many people in all these different countries, in America, in Russia, these Sunnis, these Muslims, they believe that you are oppressing them?
Because the first narrative, when it started internationally, mainly in the West, of course, and within Syria, and in some mainstream media in our region and in the West, their plan was to create this rift within the society that will make things easier for them when you have such a civil war, kind of civil war between sects or ethnicities, and it failed. Now they keep using the same narrative, at least to encourage some fanatics in different places in the world to come and defend their brothers in this area, because that's how they imagine. They imagine that there's conflict between sects. So because of their narrow-minded way of thinking, maybe or their ignorance, they came here just to support their brothers. Now, if I'm going to tell you this is right or wrong, your audience doesn't know me. They don't have any idea maybe about my credibility. But I'll tell you, you know Syria very well. It's better to go and see the reality on the ground. Now, if there's such a narrative, let's say, in reality, sects killing another sect, Syria should be divided now according to sectarian line. You should come to this area under our control and see one color or a few colors of the Syrian society. You should go to the other area where you have the terrorists. You should have different colors. And the reality is not like this. Now, in Damascus, in Aleppo, in Homs, in every area under the Syrian government control, you will see every spectrum of the Syrian society, with no exceptions. So that this reality will debunk this narrative. I mean, how could they live with each other while the government is killing them according to sectarian basis? It doesn't work.
Fair enough, but with regards to negotiations and reconciliation, there have been efforts to start talks to achieve a result in Geneva, in ASSAD. Now, there has been limited success, but it hasn't been all that great. Now, let's be honest, you're winning. You're winning on the ground, your forces are advancing, the rebels are in retreat. Why would you negotiate with them now that they're losing?
Since the very beginning, we said whenever we can save Syrian blood, we have to go forward and deal with this with any initiative, any kind of initiative, even if they have bad will. Some initiatives have bad will, but in spite of that, we dealt with. And the reality now, if you go around Syria, the reality, the results that's been embodied by the reconciliations is a proof of what I'm saying. Without this policy, without this intention of saving blood, negotiating, talking to people, we couldn't have reached these reconciliations. This is one thing. The other thing, not everyone fought the government have the same basis. Some of them have ideological background, some of them for financial background. Some of them, they made mistake at the very beginning. They were forced to go in that direction, and they couldn't withdraw. So you have to open the doors, and you have to distinguish between different kind of people. And the most important than this, the majority of the people who were against the government, apparently in the different liberated area, actually in their hearts, they are with the government. Because they could tell the difference between having government and having chaos.
Well, with regards to talks and retaking areas by force, let's take, for example, SDF-controlled territories in Deir ez-Zor. There have been clashes there between troops who were loyal to you and the SDF itself, United States partners, and the United States brought to bear force to stop troops loyal to you from taking territories. This has happened at Al-Tanf as well. How are you going to deal with the United States presence, military presence in Syria?
After the liberation of Aleppo and later Deir ez-Zor, and before that Homs and now Damascus, actually the United States is losing its cards. The main card was al-Nusra, that was called moderate. But when the scandal started leaking that they are not moderate, they are Al-Qaeda, that was supposed to be fought by United States, they look for another card. This card is the SDF now, because when, as it seems, as you just mentioned, we are moving forward in the different areas to defeat the terrorists, the only problem left in Syria is the SDF. We're going to deal with it by two options. The first one, we started now opening doors for negotiations, because the majority of them are Syrians. And supposedly they like their country. They don't like to be puppets to any foreigners. That's what we suppose. So we have the same basis. We all don't trust the Americans for decades, not because of the war, but they only say thing and they do the opposite. They tell daily lies. So we have one option, is to live with each other as Syrian, like forever. This is the first option. If not, we're going to resort to liberating by force, to liberating those areas by force. We don't have any other options. With American or without Americans, we don't have any other option. So this is our land, it's our right, and it's our duty to liberate it. And the American should leave somehow. They're going to leave. They came to Iraq with no legal basis, and look what happened to them. They have to learn the lesson. Iraq is no exception, and Syria is no exception. People will not accept foreigners in this region anymore.
Well, with regards to retaking territories, it seems inexplicably, whenever you eliminate one threat, say be it Ghouta, another threat seems to materialize, and this has happened repeatedly. Now we have the Israeli energy minister who is threatening that his country could, quote, liquidate you and your government. Are you afraid? Are you afraid, and how do you take that threat?
Since we were born, I'm talking about my generation, and most of the generations now in Syria, we lived under the threat of the Israeli aggression. This is something in our unconscious feeling. So to say that you're afraid while living with the same threat for decades, this is nonsense. Israeli has been assassinating, killing, occupying for decades now, for more than around 7 decades in this region. But usually they do all this without threatening. Now, why do they threat in this way? This is panic. This is kind of hysterical feeling, because they are losing the dear ones. The dear ones, al-Nusra and ISIS. That's why Israel now is panicking recently, and we understand their feeling.
Well, Israel is now seemingly striking across Syria, airstrikes at will. They're boasting publicly on camera again and again that your defenses, they're powerless to stop them, that they can do in Syria whatever they want. Is that true? Is there anything you can do to stop Israel carrying out its airstrikes in Syria?
Yeah. Actually, the first target of the mercenaries in Syria was the air defense. Before attacking any other military base, it was the air defense. And you would be surprised at that time, why do they attack the air defense? The air defense will not deal with the peaceful demonstrators, as they say, or with the moderate forces, and it cannot deal with extremists anyway. It's another thing, it's to defend the country. This is the other proof that Israel was in direct link with those terrorists in Syria. So they attacked those bases and they destroyed big part of our air defenses. Now, in spite of that, our position, let's say our air defense is much stronger than before, thanks to the Russian support, and the recent attacks by the Israeli and by the American and British and French proved that we are in a better situation. Now the only option, my answer to your question, is to improve our air defense. This is the only thing that we can do, and we are doing that.
Well, Israel says that its strikes are so far that they aren't targeted against you, the president or the government, that they're targeted at Iran. They're to keep Iran, which is your ally, weak in Syria. It's strange, but Iran being here, they are your allies, it's no secret, they have helped, but them being here now puts you at threat. Would you ever consider asking Iran to leave?
The most important fact regarding this issue that we don't have Iranian troops. We never had, and you cannot hide it. And we were not ashamed to say that we have. Like we invited the Russians, we could have invited the Iranians. We have Iranian officers who work with the Syrian army as help, but they don't have troops. The starkest fact about their lives, about this issue, the Iranian issue, that the recent attack a few weeks ago, they said that they attacked Iranian bases and camps, as they said allegedly. And actually we had tens of Syrians, martyrs and wounded soldiers, not a single Iranian. So how could they say that we have it? So it's a lie. We always say that we have Iranian officers, but they work with our army. We don't have troops.
Well, changing subject now with regard to chemical attacks. There are now regular alleged chemical attacks happening in Syria. Your government and your allies have said that you had nothing to do with this. Your allies have backed your claims, denying any responsibility, saying they have no knowledge of you carrying out these attacks. The question is, in whose interest is it to gas opposition to you?
That's the most part of the answer. In whose interest? That's the question. Is it in our interest? Why? And why no? Because the timing of this alleged strike was after the victory of the Syrian troops in Ghouta. Let alone the fact that we don't have chemical weapons anyway, and let the other fact that we're not going to use it against our people, because the battle in Syria was about winning the heart of the civilians. This is the main battle, and we won it. So how can you use chemical weapons against civilians that you want them to be supportive to you? This is the first. Second, if you want to use it, let's suppose that you have it and want to use it. Do you use it after you finish the battle or before or during? It's not logical. Second, if you go to that area, it was very cramped area by armies, by factions and by civilians. Whenever you use such armaments or weapons in that area, you're going to harm everyone. Something that didn't happen. And if you go to that area and you ask the civilian, there was no chemical attack by anyone. Even the Western journalists who went there after the Ghouta was liberated, they said, we asked the people, they said, we didn't see any chemical attack. So it was a narrative, it was just pretext in order to attack Syria.
Well, it may have been a pretext, but we now have proof that, even mere rumors on Twitter, a few videos of confusing videos of showing allegedly the aftermath of an attack is enough to justify for the United States, its allies, launching cruise missiles at Syria. What if, conveniently, there's another attack, alleged attack? Could there be a lot more missiles aimed at Syria?
Of course it could, because when the United States trampled over the international law on daily basis, sometimes in different areas for different reasons, any country in the world could have such an attack. What the legal base of this attack, what the legal base of their aircraft with their alliance, the so-called anti-terrorist alliance that support the terrorists actually, what the legal base of that alliance? Nothing. What the legal base of the attack in Yemen, in Afghanistan, on the border with Pakistan, etc. There's no legal base. So as long as you don't have international law that could be obeyed by United States and its puppets in the West, there's no guarantee that it won't happen. That happened a few weeks ago, and that happened last year in April 2017, and that could happen anytime. Exactly, I agree with you.
But the response Trump promised was going to be extreme and severe, according to his words early on. The response that we saw, the strike that we saw after the latest alleged chemical attack, it seemed to be much more symbolic, much smaller in scope, and there was inexplicably, again, a delay when Trump promised the attack and when it came. Why was there a delay? Did it have something perhaps to do with the Russians?
It has two aspects as we saw it. The first one, they told a story, they told a lie, and the public opinion around the world and in the West didn't buy their story, but they couldn't withdraw. So they had to do something, even on smaller scale. The second issue related to the Russian position that time, as you know, that the Russians announced publicly that they're going to destroy the bases that's going to be used to launch missiles. And our information, we don't have evidence, we only have information, and those informations are credible informations, that they were thinking about comprehensive attack all over Syria. And that's why the threat pushed the West to make it on much smaller scale.
Well, with regards to the United States' relation towards you, President Trump has called you, quote, Animal Assad. Do you have a nickname for the US president?
Yeah. This is not my language, so I cannot use similar language. This is his language. It represents him. I think there's a very known principle that what you say is what you are. So he wanted to present what he is, and that's normal. Anyway, it didn't move anything, and this kind of language shouldn't move anything for anyone. The only thing that moves you is what people that you trust, people who are level-headed, people who are thoughtful, people who are moral, ethical. That's what should move anything inside you, whether positive or negative. Somebody like Trump will move nothing for me.
Well, with regards to the United States presence here, and there's an interesting thing, you know, I came up with thoughts up of a while ago. There are now in Syria forces from five nuclear powers directly engaged in military operations in Syria, be it boots on the ground or airstrikes. And some of those countries are on different sides. How Syrian is this civil war still?
The word civil war has been used widely since the beginning of the conflict in Syria, even by our friends and by our allies, by mistakes, without understanding the content of this meaning. Syrian civil war means there are sectarian lines based on either ethnicities or sects or religion, or maybe political opinion or political currents, let's say. Something we don't have in Syria. In reality, in the area controlled by the government, which is now the majority of Syria, you have all these diversities. So the word civil war is not correct. What we have actually from the very beginning, mercenaries, Syrians and foreigners being paid by the West in order to topple the government. This is the reality, the mere reality, the very stark reality. Everything else is just masks to cover the real intentions, talking about political differences, moderates, peaceful administration. We don't have civil war in Syria. If we had civil war for 7 years, we should have been divided by now. You cannot have one country, united society, if not geographically, because now of the United States puppets and the Turkish puppet. Without that, you should have it divided socially. Go by yourself, deal with different spectrum of the Syrian society, and you can answer that question in the same way I'm answering now.
But with regards to potential escalation, okay, there are proxy forces from all these 5 nuclear powers as well as their own forces engaged in Syria. But you, as the president, again, must have information. How close have we come during this civil war, during this war, to an escalation between these nuclear powers?
In reality, we were close to have direct conflict between the Russian forces and the American forces. Fortunately, it has been avoided, not by the wisdom of the American leadership, by the wisdom of the Russian leadership, because it's not in the interest of anyone in this world, and first of all, the Syrian, to have this conflict. We need the Russian support, but we need at the same time to avoid the American foolishness in order to be able to stabilize our country.
And just briefly, one last question. The closer we get to the end, is the danger of an escalation, in your estimation, is it decreasing or is it, on the other hand, increasing?
As I said at the very beginning, the more we get closer to the end, the more they want to make it farther. What does it mean? The more stability you have, the more escalation we'll have. The more reconciliation you have in one area, the more killing and destruction and trying to capture more areas by the terrorists will have. That's why within the reconciliation, when we started reconciliations in many areas, the other factions in the same area tried to destroy it because they have the orders from the outside not to go toward any reconciliation. Of course, you have the orders with a bucket of money. So what you say is correct, but the more escalations we have, the more determined we'll be to solve the problems, because you don't have any other choice. Either you have country or you don't have country.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your insights, and thank you very much for welcoming us here and giving us so much of your time. We wish you all the best, the Syrian people all the best, and a swift conclusion to this awful conflict. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you for coming to Syria.
Now, a Palestinian journalist who was shot 2 weeks ago by Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip has succumbed to his injuries. 25-year-old Ahmed Abu Hussein was shot on the 13th of April while covering anti-occupation protests along the so-called buffer zone for a local radio station. His body has been transferred now to Gaza for a funeral. Abu Hussein is the second journalist killed since the March of Return protest began on March 30th. The death of Abu Hussein brings to 41 now number of Palestinians killed by Israeli forces since the start of the mass anti-Israel protests in the besieged coastal sliver. Now joining us out of New York for more on the story is David Feldman, spokesman for Israelite Karta International. Hello, Mr. Feldman. It's a pleasure to have you on the program, sir. Your thoughts on 2 journalists killed and a slew of other Palestinians, most of them unarmed, right there along the so-called buffer zone?
Well, this is a very, very sad story. This is going on now already for weeks. And unfortunately, this is just a continuation of this ridiculous occupation going on in Palestine in general and going on in the Gaza Strip with siege already for so many years. This is truly ridiculous, especially when we find this happening to journalists who are supposed to be able to feed us all throughout the world with journalism, with news. We should have freedom of press. We should have freedom of all people's here. Now, this is very sad. And unfortunately, you know, us as Jewish people, as a Jewish rabbi, what I have to say is that this is so sad and so painful, especially when this is done supposedly in our name. This state of Israel dares not only to commit all these crimes against the Palestinian people, but unfortunately claims to be Jewish. Netanyahu insists that you call this a Jewish state, and this is truly embarrassing to Jewish people worldwide. We have people, Jewish people worldwide, who stood up in the past couple of weeks to condemn all what is happening. It was just like about 3 weeks ago when sadly the first journalist was shot, and myself and many other of my colleagues gathered in New York City in memory of this journalist. This is truly sad and a criminal. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want you to try to explain how Tel Aviv justifies the killing of unarmed protesters. A couple of the kids, I mean, the ones I mentioned, that, you know, I said most of them are unarmed. I mean, a couple of these young kids, they pick up a rock. You very well know that doesn't even reach the fence from where they're standing. And, I mean, how's that a threat, and how does that justify and warrant live fire by an Israeli sniper to pick these young children off? And how can Tel Aviv justify this?
You know, there is no way that this can be justified. But sadly, this is not the first time when Tel Aviv will try to justify whatever they are doing. This is basically happening already for 70 years now. From the very beginning, this occupation was wrong. This was illegal. This was a violation of international law. And this is violation of Jewish law as well. All of this is intolerable. And this is criminal and anti-Jewish.
And do you think Tel Aviv will have to stand to answer for a lot of these crimes that's committed against Palestinian protesters?
Well, this is there's no way of answering this other than just to say we all have to join our voice and condemn all these atrocities, condemn all these cruel behavior, condemn this occupation, condemn this siege on Gaza. And we can hope, we have to pray, and we urge people to pray for the peaceful dismantlement of this Zionist regime, this state of Israel, this occupation. And hopefully once this political movement stops, we can expect a peace in the region. We had peace in the region. Palestine was a beautiful country before this state of Israel came in. It was not only beautiful for the Muslim Christian people, so beautiful for the minority of Jewish people living there. We lived in peace. We don't need a state of Israel to protect Jews. It happens to be the state of Israel as a destruction for everyone living there.
Thank you for joining us, David Feldman, spokesman for the Israelite Karta International, joining us out of New York.
Well, as you know, we've been bombarded with two different versions of events of those strikes that hit Syria in mid-April. And today, the Russian Defense Ministry really upped the ante by providing some actual tangible evidence of those missiles it says were either intercepted or simply malfunctioned. And this is going to be an embarrassing development for the US side, which had lauded the success of those 105 airstrikes, which it said were precise and overwhelming, also dismissing any suggestions by Russia that any of those missiles had been intercepted, also insisting that the Syrian air defense capabilities had been largely ineffective, with the Syrian missiles merely being fired into open air. Take a listen.
With way over 100 missiles shot in, they didn't shoot one down. The equipment didn't work too well, their equipment, and they didn't shoot one. You know, you heard, oh, they shot 40 down, then they shot 15 down. They watched. Then I said, did they? No, sir. Every single one hit its target.
So I think we can be quite confident and say that the US side is not going to let this lie, probably already crafting a response email or response statement, should I say, as we speak. The Russian Defense Ministry also went into detail earlier about the targets of those 105 missiles. Only 22 of those 105 missiles actually hit their intended targets. And it's been revealed that they actually hit civilian objects rather than the alleged chemical supplies the US has been so persistent upon. Take a listen.
Some of the missiles didn't reach the targets, apparently due to malfunctions. They were a threat to civilians there, in civilian buildings. At the same time, the logic of the US, UK, and France in choosing the targets is unclear. They say there were stockpiles of toxic agents there. If they were hit by cruise missiles, this could lead to widespread poisoning. And if it was for Damascus itself, tens of thousands of people could have died.
So this latest development is probably going to deal a blow to the US president's ego as well. He had boasted so optimistically about the performance of his missiles, and after those strikes he even saw his popularity on the upturn, with his approval rating jumping a few percentage points. So this turnabout is not something we could expect him to let lie.
Well, let's see what security analyst and former UK Army officer Charles Shoebridge has to say about this. He's at our studios in London right now. Hello again, welcome to RT. You look at both sides saying what they say about what happened in Syria. The discrepancies are huge. Why do you think they're so far apart on what they say happened in Syria a couple of weeks ago?
Well, of course, there are two competing stories because there are two competing narratives, as we know, but all credit to RT for mentioning both of them, and the fact that actually there are two narratives. If you listen to the West media, of course, especially British and American media, almost uniformly, there is only one narrative and anything else is just simply ridiculed. I mean, the truth may be that all of these weapons got through despite the evidence for today, and I can come on to that in a moment, or that only 20 odd came through, or some figure in between, which is perhaps where the truth might lie. But certainly the existence of fragments like this could point to the fact that some missiles malfunctioned, were shot down, or simply landed in the wrong place. But even from a successful strike, you will find some fragments from the weapons used, but usually not in the kind of sizes that we're talking about here. And so, although I haven't seen all of the footage that's being presented today by the Russian Defense Ministry or by the military, it certainly suggests that at least some of those missiles did malfunction. And indeed, with such a large number of weapons being fired and anti-aircraft fire being directed at them, you would expect, at the very least, a small proportion of them not to get through. So it may well be that the final truth, if it's ever revealed, lies somewhere in between. But regardless of this, the fact that you've got in the possession of Russia missile parts of what are quite sophisticated weapon systems that Russia has openly declared, and you would expect that they are going to be examining this to see if their air defense systems and their jamming systems and so on, electronic jamming systems, can be improved yet further from examining these fragments and remains of these British, American and presumably French weapon systems. That will be a source of great concern, I think, to the American, British and French side, particularly given that the impact of these strikes in terms of affecting the military capabilities of Syria, even less Russia, of course, has been so limited, and therefore there's not much of a return, a reward risk ratio, if you see what I mean, has been satisfied here. In other words, the Russians have gained some technical knowledge of weapon systems that actually were sacrificed by the West or by those three powers, really at great risk for actually not much tangible benefit on the ground, given that these were largely civilian or empty targets.
Charles, do you expect any acknowledgement from any top brass in Washington on this? I know we're used to Donald Trump speaking like this. Everything's the biggest, the best, that he'd claim credit for Tuesday if he could. But do you expect any of the military top brass to at least acknowledge that, yes, OK, we hit the targets, but some may not?
Yeah, I mean, there are two questions. I mean, there are many questions, of course, over this whole incident, let alone the Duma incident, but also the response to it. The legal aspects are some of those, but the military capabilities, as you suggest, are also one of those issues that are rightly being questioned here. But of course, the way that it will be handled publicly will be probably the way that it's usually handled, which is either it will be ignored or think tanks and so-called experts will be asked and tasked, if you like, to ridicule those Russian reports. But no matter what evidence is put on the screen, it's spun in a certain way, and that applies, of course, to all countries and all media, or most media, and certainly it applies to the West media at the moment. You'll only hear the one side. But really, what's interesting, of course, is that the Russians today have said, the Russian side has said that its tests of these target areas has produced no evidence of chemical weapons, even in small quantities, being present. And that, of course, what I would say on that is actually consistent with what was being reported by media outside the UK and US and France pretty much at the time. You remember that even the day after those strikes, when those buildings were still burning and there was a lot of smoke and fumes still around, you had large crowds of reporters, albeit not British and American and French reporters for whatever reason, but other reporters from India and elsewhere were on the scene, not wearing protective equipment, and the scientists and the people working in those buildings were also there to say, if there were chemical weapons here, we certainly wouldn't be able to stand here now without protective equipment. And one further quick point on this is that, of course, this is also consistent with what the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons have themselves consistently repeatedly reported in their inspection visit reports to these plants. As late as November 2017, the OPCW was stating in its reports only published in March of this year, just a couple of weeks before these strikes, that there was no evidence of any illicit chemical weapons activities or storage going on at these plants.
I guess the rule of thumb is listen to everybody, make your own mind up. For now, security analyst and former British Army officer Charles Shoebridge, I really appreciate your insight on this again. Thanks very much.
How about Shimmy Awashai? Here it is, Iran is threatening eagle-faced Trump if they pull out the nuclear deal. So things is getting heating up out there in the Middle East, man. Things is picking up. They're saying they pull out the nuclear deal, there's gonna be problems, man. There's gonna be beef. That's the spirit that's in the air. And hey, we're in the midst of still this Illuminati birthday. Mayday, Illuminati birthday. The day of Beltane. We're in the midst of their seasons of the sacrifice for the beast. Very satanic and illuministic.
The real 3-6 Mafia, about to push the chip, the microchip. Mayday, Illuminati birthday, blood rituals, The truth makes us real mad. Our kingdom going down, we're too proud to be sad. Russian nukes, make them go blast. Babylon gonna be a thing of the past. We truly hate the house of David. Spiritual darkness where the synagogue is saying ha. We're coming for you, men of valor. You're right, we're the ones orchestrating the crash of the dollar.
Got information that they banned the Bibles in China, Canada, and the UK, and California's next. China, Canada, and the UK, and California's next. They're gonna start banning the Bible. Why don't they ban the Kibunigas or the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Lost Book of this and the Lost Book of that? Why don't they burn those books? Book of the Dead. Why the Bible? Why? The Bible's powerful, man. But the movie Book of Eli. That's what it was all about. Book of Eli. They wanted the power. They wanted to control the power because they knew that book had the power. That book had the power. And these devils know that that book has a spirit, fed, or informed. The Federal Reserve knows they control all that shit. These elites. But they know the Bible is the book, man. They know that the scriptures is real. That's why they got the archaeology, they dig it up. That's why they call themselves the Jews, man. Why do they call themselves the Jews? When they're not the Jews, they're the fake Jews, man. They're the synagogue of Satan. They never apply down to the real Jews when you read in Revelation 3rd chapter. The Rothschilds elites, man. These elitists. That's the spirit. Yeah, man. They have a shield and a bunch of other symbols in the back of the car. Got a star crescent symbol. Yeah, these devils know. They know what's the power. They know what's the truth. That's why they're going to ban street preaching real soon. Famine the word, man. We know that. They're going to persecute the prophets. If you believe in the Bible, you believe in the scriptures, and truth and sincerity, you believe in the Lord's name, Yahweh Shem Yahushai, you Israelites out there, Israelites scattered abroad, it's going to have Israelites looking like all nations. But their forefathers' line goes back to one of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's why they want to chip everybody. That's why they want to ban the Bible. That's why they want to chip everybody, because this word is out. This word is spread like wildfire. They hate that shit. They hate it. They hate the fact that it's spread like wildfire. They hate it. You know, but we all know it's part of the movement, man. We know it's all part of the movement. It's all part of the movement. We're gonna ban the Bible. Canada, China, UK, California's next, they're saying. And it's gonna trickle down to other states. You know, we're gonna have these major false flags and scriptures and watching YouTube videos. Come on, man. You Rothschild, you elites, corny as hell.
Shalom. This is the men of Dallas, South Carolina, coming straight at you, man. With the brother Shamar.
Shalom, Yasharala.
I'm Yeshaya. We missing one other member. He's at work, but it's a quick in transit. First and foremost, giving all honor and praises and glory to Yahweh, Hashem, Yahushai, Hashem, Ha, Makah, Quadash. Double honor to the elders and apostles at Great Millstone. We well through the scriptures, and peace, love, salutations, and blessings to the elect. All right. Me and the brother, just going through our paths. Daily paths, and just living this life, man, or this vapor of a life, navigating through it through the spirit, man, and just sometimes the Lord's mercy is they're unfathomable in these bodies, man, and the Lord gave us a moment of clarity where we actually saw a glimpse of how wonderful His mercies and how innumerable His mercies are, man.
Hey, that's right, brother.
I'm gonna bring out that Lamentations if you want to say
something.
something.
Yeah. Nah, man. What the brother's saying is, being in the flesh right now, we only can handle glimpses of that majesty and that glory and that beauty, man. And sometimes it, speaking for myself, I'm sure I speak for many Yakim that it'll overwhelm you at times, man. And you look at all the prophets. All the prophets had their moments where they was overwhelmed in the spirit. That's right. Because that's the power of the Lord, man. Mm-hmm. It'll make you fall down on your face, man.
Yeah, and cry. Yeah.
Like that's what He does, man.
That's what it does. And only the elect is going to be able to feel His mercies, man. Because just like the second Esdras in the 9th chapter says, they've received benefits but not known, and just to know Yahweh Shem Yahushai, know that He's in control of everything, left and right hand side, we thank Him as much as we can, right?
Thank God.
As much as we can, that's not even enough. I got Lamentations 3:22. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Yeah. Amen. The Lord is my portion, save my soul. Therefore will I hope in Him, man.
Yeah.
The Lord is good unto them that wait for Him, to the soul that seeketh Him, man.
Hey,
so, you're right. So, hey, man, all we gotta do is keep doing the work, keep seeking the Lord, and Lord willing, It says that is the Lord is good unto them that wait for him and that seek it for him. So patience is a virtue. All right, and faith in Yahweh Shem Yahushua is paramount, man. You know, and he just as was that Psalms 37:4.
Right.
Yep. Like thyself in the word of the Lord, and he make it come to pass.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I was thinking of another one in the Psalms where the psalmist said, "Whoever trusted in him and was ashamed."
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Whoever put their trust in Yahweh Shem Yahushua and was ashamed or confounded.
That was in that you can find that in Ecclesiastes, the 2nd chapter.
So like the brother said, man, putting your faith and trust in the Lord, you know, looking unto the author and finisher of our faith, which is Yahweh Shah.
That's right.
Who you read is called Jesus. Even in 2018.
Right.
You know, and hey, man, and everything else, like the brother said, falls into place, so to speak.
Everything, and it makes this hell of a life that much easier. Man.
That's right.
Like Yahweh Shah said, his burden is his yoke is not heavy. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Because Yahweh Shah said, if you need rest, man, if you're weary, come to me.
Right.
And my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
My burden is light. My yoke is easy, man. He said, and he, man, just as he did when he walked the earth, he bore our griefs. He's doing that. He does that not still.
Gone, brother, because he ever liveth to make intercession for his elect.
Exactly.
So, man, you know, hey, it is what it is, man. We just wanted to come on and just basically praise the Lord, man.
That's right.
You know, because a lot of times we get caught up, and it's not a bad thing, but you get caught up in prophecies, you get caught up in teaching. It just get back to the basics, man. Hey, the Lord wants us to praise Him, man.
Exactly. That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. We're here to lift up holy hands, man, and reverence and exalt, you know, His name.
Exactly.
For everything that He does,
everything,
man. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Everything, because
everything
in the Lord dwells nothing but righteousness.
That's right.
So everything that happens is perfect. It's perfect, pretty much, man.
Come on, brother.
And this is one of my favorites, man. It's Psalms 136. You know, and through this whole thing, David is ending the verse with his mercy endureth forever, man. Okay, and he said it all through the 26 verses, man.
Yeah.
You know, and hey, I'm just gonna read a couple of them. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for He is good, for His mercy endureth forever. Oh, give thanks unto the power of powers, for His mercy endureth forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for His mercy endureth forever. To Him who alone doeth great wonders, for His mercy endureth forever. To Him that by wisdom made the heavens, for His mercy endureth forever. So, man, it's Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah. You know, that's why we say that, man. You know, we gotta praise the Lord, bless the Lord, you know, and thank Him, man. Thank the Lord for Himself. You know, thank the Lord for the Lord.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful, man. And look at what David had to go through, man.
Right.
You know, look, not only did the Lord spare him, because he committed 2 sins worthy of death. The Lord spared him, but then he had to face members of his own household trying to kill him. His own countrymen chasing him down. His friends betrayed in the house of his friends. Betrayed in the house of his friends. You know what I mean. He was on the run, man. And look,
he died sickly.
Yeah, he died sickly. Think about how great of a king he was, man.
But what did he say though? It's like I ain't mean to.
Go ahead, bro.
Psalms 118:18. The Lord has chastened me sore, but has not given me up unto death. You know, so hey, and the whole time David kept his integrity because he knew that the sins that he committed were worthy of death, but the Lord's mercies. That's why the scriptures say we're seeking the tender mercies of death.
Brother. That's a beautiful way to end it because that's what all of us in the truth are looking for, the sure mercies of David.
That's right, the sure mercies. That's right.
Yeah,
that's beautiful, man. And we just want to give a quick little, you know, just to exhort the Lord, man.
Yeah,
and to just praise Him. You know, hey,
praise Him at all times. You know,
right.
Stay encouraged, man.
Right.
Keep your eyes on the Lord.
That's right. Keep believing in the Lord because He will not fail.
That's right, bro.
All right.
That's right.
But yeah, man. Want to give all honor, praises, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Ha, Makar, Quadash. Double honors to our elders and apostles at Great Millstone, and peace, love, salutations, and blessings to the elect. Shalom, shalom.
Ba'ashem Yahushai, double honors and men of your life for the truth. The day Yahushai shall rise first.
and double honor to the elders of the house of David. By Alpha Wadah, the 144,000, the lions and the warriors, the preachers and the warriors of the 144,000, the 1/3 men, women, and children, part of the elect. To the Israelite foreigners that are scattered in four corners of the earth, confusion of faces, speaking of different tongues, meaning the different languages where Israel was scattered. Israel was scattered amongst all nations. And basically, I just wanted to bring this out real quick because I only have about 2-3 minutes on this phone. The Comforter, which I think this is all a setup anyway, man. You know, hate group preacher treasurer accused of embezzling 5.3 million, right? This was a couple hours ago. Jermaine Grant, also known as Chief High Priest Hazadaki of the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ. All right, this was in New Jersey. A Mercedes-Benz van trips to Disneyland and private school tuition were just some of the gifts Jermaine Grant lavished on his family, all ostensibly paid for with the income from this entertainment company. In reality, and notice how they put hate group preacher, you know, demonizing us, man, because they're going to equate all Israelites with this bullshit, which we know they sold out, calling himself the Comforter. In reality, the U.S. Attorney Office has alleged all were ill-gotten gains of a scheme by Grant 43 and Lincoln Warrington 43 to siphon millions from the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ. The New York-based religious organization is part of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, which believes black people are amongst the lost tribes of Israel. Not only blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, and Israelites that were also scattered. Because you're going to have Israelites looking like all nations. But like the scriptures say, we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. This is to demonize us. Grant, who has led the organization under the name Chief High Priest Dazadaki, has preached that a black Jesus, Yahweh Shai, which is his real name, will return to earth and enslave and kill all white people. No, Edomites. Alright, starting with the Rothschild's leads. The Southern Poverty Law Center has previously cited his comments in classifying the church as a black nationalist hate group. Both men were arrested Wednesday on a grand jury indicted charges with them with conspiring to defraud the United States, and Grant with an additional 5 counts of personal income tax evasion. While leading the church between 2007 and 2016, prosecutors allege Grant and Warrington, a Teaneck resident and treasurer for the church, used Black Icon Entertainment, a phony company, reliant almost entirely on church funds, to siphon off more than $2.5 million from the organization. Grant of Burlington Township himself spent another $2.9 million of church funds on personal expenses that include the van, trips, and school tuition, in addition to luxury items, real estate, and chauffeur luxury car service to take the kids to school. Prosecutors said the U.S. Attorney's home office said none of the $5.3 million of income was reported by either man to the IRS. The arrest came also 2 years after DNA Info reported FBI agents have raided the group's headquarters.
Praise Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. And basically, I just got reports that there was a second oil refinery that exploded in Wisconsin. What's up, Reg? There was a second oil refinery that exploded in Wisconsin. You know, which, if you remember, was the 18th or 19th. There was one in Texas. There was an oil refinery that exploded in Texas. So that goes into the blood sacrifice to the beast. You know, starting from the April 19th to May 1st. And now you have multiple explosions in Wisconsin in the second oil refinery less than a week. That's not a coincidence. And the movie Infinity Wars is coming out tomorrow. Like I said, it's all illuministic, man. Going into May Day, Illuminati birthday, man. You know, sacrifices, human sacrifice, fire sacrifice. You know, that's why it's not a coincidence that the chemical attacks happened in the same time frame when you look at it. You know, it's all symbolism with these devils, man. You know, it's going into worshiping Satan, basically. Worshiping Satan, man. So there was an evacuation Dabu 7 brought out. Massive evacuations, massive explosions in the oil refinery. Second oil refinery in 1 week. You know, and that's symbolic. It's an omen, it's a false flag. For the brothers and sisters that see what the hell's going on, man. Which the majority of people don't know what's going on. And they're zombified. You know, but us, the prophets, which means to say before, that's all it means. We're watching the news, seeing what's going on. We can see through the bullshit. You know, we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. Infinity Wars coming out tomorrow. All these oil refineries exploding. You know, and it's going to intensify daily. It's going to intensify. They're preparing a major false one very soon. Stay on point. Be on guard. Be watchmen. I want to keep you updated. Shalom.
Breaking news now from today's TMJ4.
And then breaking news tonight, an era is ending. The last great Milwaukee-based department store is going out of business.
Boston store employees told Tonight the company will be liquidated, the stores and their jobs gone within months. The CEO of Bon-Ton telling employees it will close 250 locations across the country once a bankruptcy court signs off on the liquidation deal. That will include a dozen Boston store locations across southeast Wisconsin.
As hundreds of Bon-Ton stores prepare to close their doors, shoppers at the South Mall are preparing to say goodbye.
I'm very sad. I think Bon-Ton's a very good store.
Bon-Ton is the only place I go.
Many shoppers say news of the shutdown is upsetting, but not surprising. The company filed for bankruptcy back in February.
They carry the top quality of everything, and we're so dominated now by big box stores.
The Bon-Ton has been at South Mall for decades.
I think people are upset about the nostalgia factor. Hass's was there before Bon-Ton, and Bon-Ton took over for Hass's.
Rachel Bierosh is the assistant mall manager. She says it's unclear when the store will officially close and what will take its place, but she's optimistic given the Bon-Ton's prime real estate.
It is located right in front of the mall, right facing Lehigh Street, so it could give us a chance for a new demographic and some new customers.
Liquidation firms Great American Group and Tiger Capital Group were the winners of an auction this week. Bon-Ton's president says the company is disappointed by the outcome, but is committed to, quote, working constructively with the winning bidder to ensure an orderly wind down of operations on our associates, customers, vendors, and the communities we serve.
The liquidation will put 2,200 people out of work in our state. It will leave gaping holes in a number of the region's largest shopping malls. That includes Bayshore Town Center in Glendale, Mayfair Mall in Wauwatosa, Brookfield Square, Southridge in Greendale, and Regency Mall in Racine. Boston store has been a part of Milwaukee since 1898, Bon-Ton dating back even further to 1854. All of it, we learned tonight, will be gone by the summer.
Get back in there at once and sell!
Now, the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, this gentleman here, says that increasing U.S. arms sales to the Middle East has transformed the region into an explosive barrel. Speaking at the International Security Conference in Russia's Sochi, Ali Shamkhani underlined that Washington uses Iranophobia as a false pretext to trigger a regional arms race. He pointed out that the U.S. sells over 70% of its weapons production to countries in this region. The senior official noted that such a vital line of economic profitability for the U.S. is the root cause of all regional conflicts. Shamkhani says that Washington's distinct approach is to create insecurity and destabilization in the Middle East. He says that the ultimate objective of such a policy is to expand the American military presence and at the same time interfere in the internal affairs of independent nations. Now let's go to London again. This time we have political commentator Rodney Shakespeare via Skype joining me. Professor, good to have you with us. What do you have to say? Let's have your comments regarding Mr. Shamkhani's comment. He says that 70%, big number, of the arms production of the U.S. goes to the Middle East region. Is this, how can you provide security? He says that this is only fanning up insecurity by selling that much arms to this region. Let's have your comments.
Yes, the Secretary of the Iranian Security Council is correct. The USA is pumping in arms and ammunition and creating a powder keg in the Middle East. But it's actually worse than that. Because you see, if you look at to whom is the recipient of the arms, these are the autocratic, anti-democratic regimes. There is a relationship between the USA and a tiny anti-democratic elite. And the USA supports the elite in exchange for the elite buying the arms. And ultimately, the USA is supporting the elite against its own people. And now you understand why the USA hates Iran. Because Iran is a profoundly democratic society. Now you know why the USA hates them and is supporting a monstrous massacre of people. Now you know why the USA supports the killer Khalifa in Bahrain And thus it goes on all the time. These arms sales are to the narrow, corrupt elite, to support the elite, to suppress democracy. Or the message should be, the USA is profoundly anti-democratic, and that is its ultimate purpose. In the same way as it supports Israel against those who want to maintain the interests of the mass of the people, which is that there should be no expansion of Israel. The USA is profoundly anti-democratic, and these arms sales are the evidence of it.
Exactly. And just recently, as you see, Professor, Trump is also asking regional states to pay for the U.S. boots on the ground in this region. That was also highlighted recently. It looks like it's only money that matters, not security.
The ultimate thing in this is anti-democracy. You see, there's no political principle with the USA, no morality at all. But you look at it, the whole thing adds up. This idea that the USA is for democracy, please forget it. It is about, where did the USA get this idea from? It got it from the British Empire. It's how the British maintained their empire, by deals with corrupt elites to support the elites to suppress local democracy. And now you know why that you've got Israel, Saudi Arabia and America in an evil alliance. Ultimately, it's not just about arms sales, it's about suppressing democracy right the way throughout the Middle East. And we ought to stand up and say the anti-democratic forces in the Middle East are led by the USA, Israel and Saudi Arabia.
All right, I appreciate your comments. Rodney Shakespeare, political commentator, joining me live from London.
Doubts are continuing to grow over claims of a chemical weapons attack in the Syrian city of Douma earlier this month. A number of Western journalists who travelled to the city say they're struggling to find eyewitnesses to confirm the reports. I discussed the story with RT's senior correspondent Murat Gazdiev.
If you were expecting any concrete evidence of Assad's culpability or even any such suggestion, well, you were in for a disappointment.
We're just coming back from a town about 5 kilometers from here, and it has approximately 20,000 people who have fled from eastern Ghouta and above all Douma. The people there are telling us, very persuasively, that this whole story from April the 7th was staged.
There are many people I talked to amid the ruins of the town who said that they never believed in gas stories, which they usually put about, they claimed, by the armed Islamist groups.
These are serious journalists that we're talking about. Robert Fisk, a reporter from The Independent, he has decades of experience in the Middle East. He went to East Ghouta, to Douma, spoke to locals and witnesses and doctors working at the medical facility. All of them told him they didn't know anyone who had suffered in this attack, who had been a victim. All they know is that someone said something about chemical attacks. As a German reporter from ZDF, there's this trend of people, journalists, coming out and saying, hold on, maybe we got this wrong, and invariably they face backlash if they go against what the media has been saying for weeks and weeks now, trumpeting that Assad did this. Suddenly, if you say, hold on a second, they come right after you. There was a retired British general who was on Sky News, I believe, and he said, it doesn't make sense for Assad to have done this. Well, look what happened to him.
What possible motive might have triggered Syria to launch a chemical attack at this time in this place? The Syrians are winning, and then suddenly you get...
Okay, I'm very sorry. You've been very patient waiting for us, but we do need to leave it there. I'm very sorry. Thank you very much indeed.
It just seems like many in Western media and Western governments already have their minds made up. They've decided they know what has happened. Look at the United States, backed by Britain and France. It launched an attack on Syria mere hours before OPCW specialists were due to arrive on the scene.
On that point, the OPCW, Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, there had been criticism that why weren't they in Duma? They're there now, right?
Yeah, they arrived on Saturday. They've collected samples, but due to how they work, their procedures, they're all very hush-hush, so there isn't a lot of information.
Where did the claims originate from? Where's the story coming out from?
Well, all pro-rebel sources. The first one was the White Helmets, which are largely financed by Western governments, pro-rebel, act as rescuers for rebel fighters, and they released videos from a hospital showing them dousing people with water, allegedly the victims of a chemical attack. Then there was the Syrian American Medical Society, which is financed again by the United States to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and they claimed that they treated 500 people with symptoms of exposure to chemical agents. It's these two sources that were cited by almost the entirety of the media and governments. It was their reports and their videos that went out. Nevertheless, with growing opinion, growing views, witnesses, testimony that nothing such happened, you've got to question where they got this from, where this information and why this information appeared in the first place. Nevertheless, the Russian position is that we shouldn't jump to conclusions. We should wait until there's hard facts with which we can, come to a judgment.